welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Elements of Ayurveda. I'm very excited today to have Myra Lewin on the show. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Myra before we start chit-chatting. Myra has studied and practiced Ayurveda and Yoga for more than 20 years. She is author of 2 books, and Myra has guided thousands of people to reclaim their natural state of health through consultations, treatments, yoga and Ayurveda teacher trainings, workshops, and retreats. Myra has extensive experience working with clients on issues including digestion, mental health, weight management, fertility, addiction, and autoimmune disorders. She offers consultations and trainings online and in person on Kaua'i through Hale Pule Ayurveda and Yoga. Myra, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, great. Thanks. Good to be here.
And as I was just saying to you a moment ago when we were chatting before recording, I have been listening to your podcast, Everyday Ayurveda and Yoga at Hale Pule, for many years now, and I really enjoy it, and you share lots of great wisdom on that show.
Oh, good. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Good thing for us.
So the first thing I'd like to ask my guests is, what's your personal journey with Ayurveda? Because there's usually some profound story, and I love to get an insight into what brought you into the world of Ayurveda.
Yes. Well, it was my yoga teacher, and she tried to introduce me to it, and at first I really couldn't take it. It just felt too complicated for me. And she knew she was an incredibly intuitive person, and she knew that it would be really good for me. And it took a few years before I actually could take it up. But when I did, it was so profound, and it wasn't like, oh, I think I'll take up Ayurveda. I still wasn't even at that point. I was in India, and some people that I had met there, they were saying, they come around and pour ghee on your food. Yeah. And you should let them do that. And I didn't do it because I had never eaten dairy in my life. And not for any reason except that I didn't think I liked the taste of it. And finally I agreed to have the ghee. And in a week's time, it made such a difference in my body. And so, that I want to say that, I had this profound moment of enlightenment, but really I had to be pushed. And then I could see that it was everything that I had been looking for so many years, because I'd been a vegetarian already 20 years, and I had also, I've really been looking for, what are the best ways to eat. And I was involved in the organic movement in the 70s. And so, those things were all really important to me, but I still still didn't feel quite right. My digestion wasn't that good. Mm-hmm. So it was, and then I went to a practitioner back in the United States, and then it really started to change. Oh my! So, and then I could see that it just made all of life make sense to me.
Right. And actually, in talking to several people about this, how they were introduced to Ayurveda, I know my own experience, there is that first introduction to it. In my experience, it was in the early 2000s with my yoga teacher training. And I thought it was just about the doshas. But I think it's then when you experience it, right, in your own body, that makes the impact.
Right. It really does. And that's how we work with people is, it's great to get some of the intellectual knowledge and that, but it doesn't really mean anything until you use it. And then you get to the simplest things are really the most powerful.
Yes. Can you give us an example of
that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Chewing your food. Oh my goodness. I mean, we've gotten so away from that, being in a hurry and being caught up with fast food and those kinds of things. And our thinking is just a little bit, perhaps Vata provoked, but we've just bought into this thing of being fast and chewing our food. If you don't chew it, then the enzymes can't mix with the food to digest it properly. So that whole process is affected. So it's like not building a proper foundation for your house.
Right. Right. So true. And also focusing on your food, because what happens now is people are eating while commuting or, eating on the go. And we definitely have that to-go culture here in the US. And that has terrible effect on the digestion also, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly does. That's right.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen as well as it could.
Right. So what we recommend in Ayurveda that you have some gratitude or take time to focus on your food, get away from external stimulation. If you're working in an office, maybe take time outside in nature to really reboot before going back into the office. Do you have any other tips for people on around mealtime?
I think, I do. A couple of things. People really need to take some deep breaths and relax inside consciously. Yeah. And that helps. And as you mentioned, having a prayer or some kind of statement of appreciation, that helps to, and those two things help to our cells to actually shift into that mode of receiving. Yeah. And because we need to be receptive at that moment that we're eating. Then the other thing too is that silence is really a nice thing while you're eating, because then you're not trying to finish chewing really fast so you can say something else. Yes. So this is another thing, just to be quiet during the meal, and then if you're with friends or something, then at the end then you go ahead and you have your talking and that. And,
yeah, because often, people think, I'm saving time by eating at my desk or eating while commuting, but actually it's going to affect you later on in the day when you're when you're not digesting properly. It could lead to excessive gas or bloating and many other problems.
Right, yeah.
So tell me, what does Ayurveda mean to you?
Well, it actually means to me how we always define it, which is it's the science of living or the science of life. And I was raised, that, science was the most important thing. But of course, that was modern science. But now that I experience this, what it means to me is that it gives me a way to find some harmony with nature, with the cosmos. That I'm not this separate thing just drifting out here. And each time I do things and experience it, it's that direct experience.
Yes.
Then that is what helps me come into a flow in my life. And that to me, that brings me freedom and that brings me joy. I have space for that in my life. Whereas otherwise, I tend to do a lot of thinking, and that thinking really doesn't, it doesn't really take me to that place of freedom. Yeah. So, so that's what Ayurveda means to me. It just gives me a whole platform on which to live, because I can always go back to the principles. I guess that's the most important thing, is that I see it as principles and not rules. And if I just go back, I can always find a principle to go back to, and I can sort out and have an answer to something. Right. If I have any problem, really can be solved. So, and sometimes we also know, of course, sometimes there really isn't a solution. Things are going in a direction, and maybe it's time for the end of life or whatever. But we can still bring some comfort, which is a really nice thing. So.
Yes. Yeah, it does provide a great foundation of guidelines for life. And I love that you say freedom, because actually this morning I just posted on my one of my business accounts on Instagram about, I read a quote, how freedom is about being yourself without anyone's permission. And I went on further to say, well, freedom is actually, I believe, understanding yourself and understanding your unique mind-body type and being able to make decisions from that understanding, which is what Ayurveda gives us.
It does, definitely.
Yeah, and just by understanding your tendencies and your mental tendencies, your physical tendencies, it really gives you empowerment and confidence to make your own decisions rather than following the crowd or the trends or the fads, right?
Right, it does, especially that we don't have to be like everybody else.
Yeah, because there is such a pressure to kind of to get in your box, whereas I think nowadays that because Ayurveda is becoming more popular, thankfully, that people are allowed the freedom to be themselves, to be their unique selves.
Yeah, it really is great for that. I'm happy to see it coming, that people are getting excited about it now and interested in it.
Yeah, and I know you teach a lot and you see many people from all over the world and travel yourself. Do you see that Ayurveda is really becoming more popular worldwide?
I do.
Great.
I've been, I work with a lot of people in Japan and go there regularly. And, when I started going there in 2010, nobody knew what it was. And now it's really become quite popular and people are getting interested in it. And, it's because people are suffering. It's because that they're doing things. And that's a culture that had a relatively healthy diet prior to World War II, we'll say. But since then, they've pretty much taken up the American diet. And now we have enough generations that the people are suffering for it. And so it's great, actually, from my point of view. It's like, finally. But I have been in some other countries recently, that it's interesting to see that where they haven't been introduced to a lot of the commercialization of food. And so they don't have the same problems. Yeah. At least at this point. And so I've had the occasion just last week, actually, doing some presentations in Vietnam.
Oh, great!
And they have a fairly balanced diet. They look at 5 of the 6 tastes, and so these are all things they consider in their cooking. So there's a lot of good that's come from that, and now they're being introduced to a lot of the commercialized food, and they're starting to have some problems. But it was really fun to give this talk with them, because there were a lot of the principles and things that they're already acquainted with, because it hasn't been programmed out of them yet.
Oh, that's so good. Well, it's so good to hear that it's still there, because, unfortunately, the rise of processed food has led to a rise in a lot of illness and disease. In our culture. And also, it's not only, the illness and the ill effects on our body and our mind, but also the fact that people are not home cooking as much, which then leads to not having as many meals together with family and friends. And then that sense of community as well that comes from even going to your local market or farmer's market and getting the food. So there's a whole ripple effect that goes out from the processed food.
Yeah, and that's another thing I'm seeing in Japan now, is that, I've been talking to people for years now, to saying, go meet a local farmer, go support them in that, and it's happening. They're starting to have some farmers markets now.
Oh, great.
And there's small farmers who are doing organic work, and so there's a lot of great things happening.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And while we're on the note of farmers markets, I'm always encouraging people, please go support your local farmers. And not only are you supporting these hardworking farmers who it's a tough job, 365 days a year, but also you get to eat local, you get to eat seasonally, which is what Ayurveda recommends. And there's less of a carbon footprint. And these foods that are in season are usually cheaper because they're abundant. So I really encourage everyone to go out and find where your local farmer's market is. And that's the best way to eat. And the simplest rule of thumb is to go to your farmer's market, see what's in season, and then start cooking from there. I always get on my little soapbox about farmers markets.
That's great. Well, we all appreciate that.
Well, you did your bit in Japan. I figured I can do my bit here. Yeah. So now you've been... I've been talking a lot about the wisdom stage of life and the importance of looking forward to this stage of life. And the wisdom stage of life, or Vata stage of life in Ayurveda, is said to be post-menopause for women or andropause for men. And like I said, I think it's something to really look forward to rather than worry about it as we tend to do in our society or have some fear around it. Can you share your experience of the Vata stage of life and how you keep your mind and body in balance, and in particular the shift from the Pitta stage of life into the Vata stage of life?
Okay.
There's a lot there.
Yes. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. That's something I love about Ayurveda, is that it gives some explanation for the changes, and it all just makes sense. And then we realize that we don't really need to fight it because there's so much value in each stage. And we're doing what is really appropriate for us at that time. That when I started learning about Ayurveda, I was in that Pitta time of life, and I started looking at it and realized that there was nothing to be afraid of. Yeah. That when I understood that all the bad things that people were saying about menopause, for example, that those mostly were imbalances that we can take care of in Ayurveda, and that menopause is not this big bad thing. And that if I'm treating myself well beforehand, that process is actually something that it's an introspective time from my experience, but it doesn't have to be this great trauma, nor does it have to be terribly uncomfortable. And so only, when we're in resistance to things in life do we find that we suffer, right? Yes. So when we realize that it's truly a wisdom time of life, if we've valued what we've done in our lives, then I think of it, it's sort of like the cream, you might say. Yes. Because we get to really enjoy the things looking back at the things we've done and being present for young people who are coming forward in life, and being able to share that with people. That's how I look at it. And so the all of the other things, I just look at them as being perhaps related to our consumer society. Yes. And they came about for that reason.
Right, absolutely. And there is so much to look forward to. Like you said, there's an opportunity to really show your true colors and not to be concerned of what people think of you. You have more confidence in yourself, and you kind of been there, done that, and there's less of a need to kind of keep up with the Joneses or the material possessions or the need for wealth, because you just want to, like you said, there's more introspective, there's more philosophical time of life, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life, right?
Right. And I also think that what I've experienced is that definitely taking care of Vata dosha is important.
Yes.
If you don't, it's going to make it a lot more uncomfortable. And so especially when I'm working with people that are in their 40s and they're already having problems with excess Vata, that's only going to get worse.
Right.
So it's always a great honor to be able to catch somebody at that point coming into Ayurveda. It's like, okay, if you change this now, this is going to make everything else a lot more fun. Yeah. And the other thing about it is that we've come to not respect older people so much in our Western culture. Mm-hmm. this is something we really need to bring back. Not because it needs to be I think a lot of it happened because our society was much more authoritative, and for whatever other sociological reasons, but that we really need to respect all stages of life. Mm-hmm. Because as we've come to not respect elderly people, we've also come to not respect children very much. Yeah. Meaning that we sort of drag them around and treat them like possessions rather than recognizing that they're very sensitive creatures. So that sensitivity that comes as a child, in some ways, when Vata is balanced coming into the Vata time of life, then that sensitivity becomes heightened again because we're not as outwardly oriented, if that makes some sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that I hope that as people look at the Vata time of life and come to have some respect for it, that recognizing, sometimes I go, I can't believe I'm here. How could I be 63 years old?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is true. It's like your spirit inside is still young, right? And as we age, we're like, wait now, I can't believe I've been here many years.
Right. And so it's, when I talk about something, I'm around a lot of young people now, which is really wonderful. Mm-hmm. And it's great to hear what they're doing and how they think and to be able to share, where I'm coming from, but also so that one of the things that comes with people with some more experience on the planet is that they've seen the changes, yes. Some of which are positive and some of which are negative, so that we can start to, bring back some of those things that were wholesome and good, mm-hmm. that kept us grounded and more connected to ourselves.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. And I remember my grandmother being 90 years of age and saying she still feels young, that she had that same feeling like, I can't believe I'm this age. I still feel so young inside. But I totally agree with you that in our society, unfortunately, like you said, the elderly are kind of put away in homes or in communities, and it's such a shame. It actually breaks my heart, and that's why I like to talk about this stage of life a lot, because back many moons ago, the elderly would have gone into the hermitage stage. They also call it in Ayurveda, where they would live on the edge of the village, and the younger people would go and seek counsel from those elders. And we live in a society now that really reveres youth. But and I agree. I think that we're losing that wisdom, not only the wisdom of the elderly, or also the wisdom of the young children, because these young children coming in today, they have many insights. They already seem awake sometimes, and they're very conscious, and we can learn so much. So I think for those of us in the Pitta stage of life, which is from puberty to menopause or andropause, is not to be so focused on ourselves and think that we know it all, but also to be open to learning from these other groups, from the young and the elderly. So I'm jumping in here to tell you about my next live group course, which is the Daily Habits course to achieve holistic health, starting February 24th, 2018. This is a 4-week online course, and in this course, we're going to be talking about the dinacharya, or daily self-care practices. And we're also going to be implementing a foundation of these self-care practices, these daily habits, to keep our body, mind, and soul in balance so that we can achieve and enjoy holistic health. So if you're ready to make some big changes to your health and well-being, as well as empowering yourself to take charge of your own health and become your own healer, then please check out the link in the show notes and come join this group as we support each other and hold each other accountable as we go through this 4-week program. I look forward to supporting you along the journey. Now, I'd love to go back, and you mentioned menopause, and talk about that a little bit, and how it's so important to introduce self-care practices, or what Ayurveda calls dinacharya, in the Pitta stage of life, which, as I mentioned, is, from puberty to menopause. But to introduce these self-care practices in our 30s and 40s so that we approach menopause and this big transition in balance, so that it's an easier transition and not the fiery one we're led to believe that it is. And this is something that's important for people to understand. Can you tell me what you recommend to clients as they're in perimenopause, let's say, which can last for 10 years before menopause comes along?
For perimenopause?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't dinacharya or the daily self-care practices.
Yes. Well, I think the most important thing that I've seen for people is Abhyanga, is to practice self-application of oil on a regular basis. I was just speaking with a client just earlier who's been calming Vata and has a Vata constitution and was significantly imbalanced and wants to get pregnant. But so she was doing Abhyanga for a while and then she stopped. And it's like, which is a typical Vata behavior. But she needs to keep going. And when we, those kinds of things, the very basic things, but they do require a few minutes of time. But I always remind people, if you're a television watcher, maybe a few minutes less television or a few minutes less on the computer. And those are the things that are going to make a difference. Also, having a meditation practice, even if it's 3 minutes, will make a difference, just because the mind then becomes willing, we'll say, to come and sit and potentially to focus on one point for a few moments. And the more we can just let the mind do what it does and be more aware of our true self, then the easier it's going to be to make decisions that will help us keep the doshas in balance. So as part of dinacharya, I think that meditation and certainly some breathing exercises I most often recommend for people too.
Great. Yes. And as most of our audience knows, but I want to make sure you understand that in Ayurveda, there's no one size fits all. That's why it's really important to have an Ayurvedic consultation so that you can determine your unique physical and mental constitution, but also if there's a current imbalance. So we can give general guidelines like the Abhyanga, the self-massage that you can do daily for yourself, and the meditation. But the breath work and the meditation and other self-care practices may very well be tuned into your needs, will be individualized and tailored to your needs. Isn't that correct, Myra?
That's right. That's right. And it's so important because, the type of oil that you use will make a big difference in the effect of it. So
yeah, absolutely. Great. And now I'd like to talk a little bit more about the Vata stage of life, go back there and kind of give some tips in this stage of life, because of course it depends again on your constitution type or your imbalance. But the Vata stage of life, there's a lot of drying in the body. So Abhyanga is very important at this stage, right? And lots of oil in the food.
Right. And that's one of the things that I see people doing is moving away from the oil and also the way away from moisture in the food.
Yeah. And
there's that tendency to want to go to dry foods, partly because it might be easier, partly because people are used to eating in restaurants. And, restaurants, they became much more prominent after the 70s. And prior to that, though, food had liquid in it. It was cooked with water. But when restaurants came about, they took the water away because they didn't want it to look messy.
That's true. I didn't think of that. That's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big thing, especially with vegetables.
Yeah.
And so now it's that people want to eat their vegetables dry, and it's that, well, the nutrients are in the liquid also.
Right.
And so it's very important to have that, but also to have that moisture, coming with the food and not just drinking water at other times. It's going to be a much easier way to absorb that.
Yes. Great. And also I want to talk about what happens mentally, imbalance-wise in the Vata stage of life, because there can be a lot of nervousness. I've worked with a lot of elderly clients, and there is that nervousness, that loneliness, that fear, the mind spinning can come in. Can we talk about that a little bit and some of the self-care practices that can help with that, and that for people to realize that this is just an imbalance, and to have some consolation in that this is not, what old age is about, but it's just a sign of imbalance.
Right. I always I remind people, maybe they've known somebody or known a relative that, got to 90 years old and was completely clear in their mind.
Yeah.
And so I remind them, and I say, there are differences in us, but there's a reason that person got that way. And so then we start talking about it. One of the big things is to have regular meal times.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned, to have plenty of oil in the diet, because those are things that people will tend to go away from for whatever reason. Sometimes people think it's because it's bad for their heart or it's their blood pressure and things like that. And all of the things that we've talked about so far are still applicable, meaning that they, need to have 3 meals a day, probably, depending on the individual. It might be 2 in some cases, but those kinds of things help to keep them grounded. And that having, for example, whole grains in their diet.
Yeah. Now,
if the Agni is weak, then we do things to take care of the Agni and keep that strong so that they will continue to have that grounding food, because it's that sense of lightness that starts coming, right, with excess Vata or just, as things are drying up a little bit in life. I do find that I have to do a little bit more, but we're talking about things that might take 1 minute a day, and just a little bit more attention. One of the things that I do that I find that is very helpful for people is Karnapurna, which is warm sesame oil in the ears.
Oh yes, that's right.
Now this is done as a full treatment. But you can do a nice small version of it at home, and it's very good for helping keep Vata calm and for sleep.
Yes.
So you just get a little bottle of sesame oil and warm it up. Lay down on your side and get comfortable, and fill the ear canal with warm sesame oil. And you want to come all the way up into the outer ear. And you could have somebody do it for you, but you can come to do it yourself too. And then lay there for 20 minutes and relax and just focus on your breath. And then use a tissue as you sit up and let the oil come out, but don't try to get it out. Let it just, whatever wants to stay in there. And then do the other side. This is really calming for Vata and, again, helpful for sleep as well.
Yeah, that's a fantastic tip. Great. Thank you so much for that. Now, you have, like I said, in the intro, been practicing Ayurveda and Yoga for more than 20 years, and you've brought all this great knowledge and experience into the holistic health facility that you now have in Hawaii, Hale Pule Ayurveda and Yoga. Can you tell me a little bit about this facility and what you offer there?
Well, actually what it is it's a home. It's a home environment, and I very much want to keep it that way so that people can see how these things work in a home environment.
Oh, that's great.
And so that's our main focus. We also, it is on a small farm, 4.5 acres, where we grow most of our vegetables, a lot of fruits, and then we do sell some vegetables outside as well. So that's the environment is quiet and peaceful. And we really, though, try to make it like, see what of this that you could take home and have it be in your home too. So, and what we do here is that we do very small, intimate trainings. Typically we're 15 people, 20 is our maximum.
Wonderful. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have very personal contact in our trainings, as well as when we do panchakarma here with people, or dosha balancing treatments. So it's very much on a personal level.
Oh, that's great. I love the concept of being in a home and then small groups, because I've been to many yoga trainings now or other trainings, and you can get lost in big groups, especially depending on your constitution types, but I find it very overwhelming in big groups. So that's wonderful.
Me too. And so, but also I try to go back to the tradition, which was both in Ayurveda and Yoga, which is one-on-one, teacher and student. And when I started doing trainings, I was doing that. But it wasn't, in the long run, it wasn't practical, nor was it wasn't promoted by our association and so forth. So I shifted to doing small groups. Yeah.
That sounds great. And so what services do you provide, or what trainings? I know you have a yoga training?
We do. We have a 200-hour, and we do also do a 300-hour yoga teacher training, and with a great emphasis in Ayurveda. Ayurveda is incorporated in it every single day. And then we also do Ayurvedic chef trainings, and we do treatment training, and we have silent retreats periodically as well.
Oh, wonderful! So it sounds like it definitely keeps you busy, but obviously you love your. Oh,
I do. I love what I'm doing. It's so amazing to see people get it, and then to have them be able to go out and hear their stories about sharing with other people. We also have an Ayurvedic counselor course online, and then we have live lectures that go with that as well. And so we're just graduating our first people from that, and it's really a wonderful thing.
Congratulations! That's great for people to know. So how long is the course? And obviously it's available online.
It is. We have a 600-hour, and then we also have a 200-hour now as well, which is more appropriate perhaps for people like a yoga teacher who wants to share more about the principles of Ayurveda and cooking and that.
Right.
And the 600-hour, though, is for someone who would like to do consultations and so forth.
Wonderful. And so the 200-hour, could that be for somebody who is just interested in learning for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's great. Oh, wonderful. And well, congratulations. It sounds like you've built quite a lovely business, but at the same time keeping it very, what would you say, very natural and in a home environment and small groups. So I think that's great. Well,
I think the most important point about Ayurveda for me is that it's based on our spiritual connection. Mm-hmm. That when I have that spiritual connection, then I'm going to make good choices.
Yes.
And then I can learn from when I don't make as good of a choice, but that I'll actually be able to learn. And when I don't have that spiritual connection, that doesn't go very well. So that's really what we teach, is that for people, to help people find that for themselves in whatever way is appropriate for them.
Right. Yeah. And so go ahead, sorry.
Oh, and I was going to say that just in that, to show how that is connected to everything else that happens in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the connection, that includes the connection to nature. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is key. And really drives our life, and the more that we are living in tune with nature, the more we will thrive, rather than going against it and suffering, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's what it's all about for all of us working in Ayurveda, and like you, it's wonderful to just share this wisdom that has made profound changes in our own life, and then to share it and see others go out then and share it with their friends and families. And we want this ripple effect to happen. And this is what we teach, is we teach others and empower them to go out into the world and live their lives. You give them the wisdom and then go forward. And there's no need for, coming back again and again. You get the wisdom and you go and you share. And that's what I love about Ayurveda. There's this freedom. Okay, here's what, you go to the level you want, whether it's a 200-hour training or a 600-hour, and then go out and share and live your life.
Mm-hmm. I think there's another thing too, is that Ayurveda is not based in fear, whereas modern medicine is based in fear. Yeah. And so that to be able to help people to move beyond that fear is really rewarding for me.
That's a great point, and you just give me chills. The thought of that. But it's true, because when I was starting out in Ayurveda and working in other centers, you see these clients coming back again and again. And for me, I thought that was wrong. A client, a patient should come, get well, but also get education about how not to get back to that point again of imbalance. Right. And that's what I think really resonates with me with Ayurveda. Like you said, it's not fear-based. It's about giving the power to the person to take charge of their own health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's great. So where can people find out more about Hale Pule?
At halepule.com. It's HALEPULE.com. And our website has lots of information. There's an extensive blog of information about Ayurveda and about yoga and about our experience with it. And there's lots of recipes there as well. And there's information about our trainings and also coming for treatment.
Wonderful. Who wouldn't like to go to Kaua'i for some treatment? It sounds amazing. Yeah. And so, Myra, before we finish up, is there any piece of Ayurvedic advice or wisdom? You've already given us great advice today, but is there anything, leaving thoughts that you'd like to give our listeners before we finish?
I think the most important thing, especially for people new to it, is to keep it as principles and to realize that it's not rules. And so even if there's something that's been a certain way for you at a certain time in life, it could shift. Mm-hmm. And so for them to educate themselves, to get educated, and let your practitioner help you with that, to understand what's happening, I think that's really important because people tend to want to have rules. And
right.
That I understand how that happens, but the more we can move away from it, the more success there will be and the more freedom people will experience.
Absolutely. Freedom is the word of the day. I love it. Yeah. That's it. Freedom to be your true self, freedom to understand yourself, and freedom to make your own decisions for your health rather than outsourcing it into somebody else's hands.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Myra, it's been an absolute pleasure. I could talk to you for hours and hours. And maybe sometime you'll come back and chat with us again. But I appreciate you coming on the show, and I wish you all the success. And thank you for all the work you're doing in the world.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Take good care of yourself.
Bye now.
I hope you enjoyed that chat with Myra. I certainly did. And please check out the show notes so you can find out all the wonderful offerings at Hale Pule Ayurveda and Yoga. And also don't forget about my upcoming online group course, Daily Habits to Achieve Holistic Health, starting February 24th, 2018. In this course, we're going to be implementing a foundation of daily self-care practices so we can achieve and enjoy holistic health. We're going to talk about how to bring the mind, body, and soul into balance, and you're going to be empowered to take charge of your own health and become your own healer. So come join the group as we support and hold each other accountable throughout the course. For more information and to register for this course, just click on the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to the show. I appreciate your support. And please be sure to subscribe so that the new shows will automatically download for you to enjoy. Take care, everyone.